Sun hasn't cleared the roofline, frost on the glass. You're standing at the kitchen window, coffee in your hand, and the black-capped chickadees and a lone cardinal are at the tube feeder. You move toward the glass, maybe 3 steps, maybe 4, and half of them flush, gone before your hand even touches the window. I spent the first 2 years paying attention to my yard here in Northern Virginia, wondering what I did wrong. 2 tube feeders, a sweet cage, a heated bird bath, the whole setup. I'd watch the chickadees feeding peacefully from the Japanese maple. I'd walk to the window, and the yard would empty the way a room empties when someone walks in who nobody's glad to see. I kept blaming proximity. I kept thinking, if I could just get close enough, consistently enough, without doing anything alarming, they'd figure out I'm not a threat. I was thinking about this backwards. Here's what most people don't know about the birds in their yard. They are not reacting to the general category of human being. They are not generalizing from every large moving thing they've ever seen. They are making a specific, individual assessment of you, your patterns, your movement, your history with them, and updating that model constantly. The distance they keep from you is a number. That number tells you exactly what their evidence says about you, nothing more and nothing less. I've been paying real attention to the birds in my small suburban yard for about 5 years now, and the research I've read on this has been more useful than most of the field guides on my shelf. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going through 7 things the birds in your yard have already recorded about you, from the way you walked to the coat you wore last week, and what those things mean for the relationship you're either building or quietly erasing. Stay through item 7. It's the one I'm still trying to figure out how to talk about. Subscribe before you go. New video every week. Number 1. The birds in your yard are not reacting to the general category of human. You probably think they just run from any large moving object. I thought the same thing for most of my life. Something large moves, bird leaves, basic physics. Then I started reading the research out of the University of Washington on how American crows recognize and remember human faces. John Marsluff and his team ran a series of field experiments going back roughly 2 decades, and what they found changed how I think about every interaction I have in my yard. Crows that had been captured by researchers wearing specific latex masks learned to identify those masks, alarm call at the wearers, and transmit that threat information to other crows who had never encountered those masks at all. Birds with no personal experience of the threat learned to fear a specific human face from other birds who had. That is not a generalized wariness toward humans. That is an individual record, maintained, transmitted, and acted on. Now, your chickadees are not crows. The house sparrow on your platform feeder is not building a dossier. But the underlying mechanism, individual recognition, behavioral memory, social transmission of threat information, appears broadly across songbird species. Work from Cornell Lab of Ornithology on feeding station birds in residential areas shows that black-capped chickadees, 11 grams, about the weight of 2 pennies, develop individual specific responses to particular regular human presences. Not to humans in general, to specific humans. Stay with me here. There is a bird in your yard right now that has a model of you. Your walk, your jacket, the sound your back door makes, the pattern of when you appear and how you move when you do. All of it filed and cross-referenced under your particular threat profile. Not a category, not a type, you. I find this equal parts embarrassing and useful. Embarrassing because it means the relationship I thought was one-directional, me watching birds, has always been mutual. They've been building a file. I just had no idea what was in it. Useful because it means the distance they keep from you is also about you specifically. And a number that reflects evidence is a number you can actually change. Number 2. There's a measurable number that tells you exactly how much the birds in your yard trust you. You can observe it right now without any equipment. It's called Flight Initiation Distance, FID, and researchers who study predator-prey dynamics have been quantifying it for decades. The concept is direct. You approach a bird, and the distance at which it decides to fly is the number. A short distance means the bird calculated that the cost of interrupting what it's doing exceeds whatever risk your presence represents. A long distance means you're in the threat category, and leaving early is cheaper than waiting to see what you do. Work from the University of Exeter, published in the journal Animal Behavior, established that FID is not a fixed species characteristic. It changes based on exposure frequency, behavioral history, and whether anything in your past interactions has forced that bird to burn energy on an unnecessary escape. Every time you cause a flush that wasn't needed, that costs the bird something. Every time you don't, you're making a small deposit in the model. In highly urban areas, birds like mourning doves, over 110 grams, heavier than most people expect for something that seems that gentle, can tolerate humans at 3 or 4 feet. Lifetime of data. The calculation is settled. In quieter suburban yards, the starting point is much farther. A northern cardinal, about 45 grams, roughly the weight of a golf ball, might flush from 15 or 20 feet before it has learned your specific patterns. The chickadees I think of as the Tuesday couple, a pair that has visited my feeder every Tuesday morning for 4 winters now, usually around 7 a.m., as reliable as anything I track. Let me stand at the back door within about 6 feet while they eat. That took 4 winters. I didn't engineer it, I just stopped doing the things that were expanding the distance and let the number fall on its own schedule. Your bird's FID is the most honest metric they're giving you. It's updated constantly, it doesn't lie, and right now it's telling you exactly where you stand. Number 3. Your body is communicating specific threat information to the birds in your yard, and nearly all of it is unintentional. Birds assess threat through 2 primary behavioral signals: the directness of your approach and where your eyes are pointing. Research on predator recognition behavior, work out of the University of Cambridge on how birds process approach trajectories, establishes that birds don't just calculate distance, they calculate trajectory and gaze simultaneously. A direct approach path combined with forward-facing eye contact is the behavioral signature of a predator that is locked onto a target. That specific combination, even at non-threatening distances, can trigger a flush that a slower, more oblique approach at the same distance would not. This is what I was doing wrong in my first 2 years in the yard and couldn't figure out. I'd see a cardinal at the feeder, turn my head toward it, and watch. Not moving, not doing anything alarming, just looking. And within 30 to 45 seconds, it would leave. Every time. I blamed proximity. It wasn't proximity. It was 2 forward-facing eyes, fixed on a bird, from a large upright animal. That is exactly what predator lock-on looks like. Watch a bird that hasn't quite decided to fly. You'll often see it execute what's called investigative orientation. It tips its head sideways, bringing one eye perpendicular to you. The research calls it a monocular high-acuity visual field. But out here in the yard, it feels like you're being scanned by a creature that weighs less than 2 pennies, taking a full measure of who you are in roughly 150 milliseconds. It's building a file. What actually helps? Slow movement, oblique angles, looking at the feeder or the ground rather than at the bird. Acting as convincingly as you can, like something that isn't thinking about them at all. I know that sounds strange as practical advice, but try it this week. Walk out toward the garden as if you're just checking the fence, ignoring the feeder entirely. Note what stays. You might be surprised how much of your effect on the birds in your yard has been in your eyes, not your feet. Number 4. I want to talk about the part of this that I found genuinely uncomfortable when I worked it out. You're probably assuming the trust builds continuously, that every quiet morning is a deposit in a running total. I thought the same thing for a long time. Here's where it gets significantly worse. The research on habituation, the process by which a wild animal learns to classify a repeated stimulus as non-threatening, shows that what birds are building is not a simple trust ledger. It's a predictive model. And predictive models don't weight evidence evenly. A single, unpredictable event, a sudden fast movement, a raised voice, a reach toward something near the feeder, carries far more weight in the model than weeks of calm, consistent behavior. Not because birds hold grudges, because in the wild, one miscalculation costs you everything. Their threat response is calibrated to be conservative on purpose. That's a survival feature, not a flaw. What this means is that you can set yourself back weeks in a single afternoon. I want to be honest about how I know this. In May 2022, there was a fledgling under my Japanese maple. It was on the ground, looked stranded. I picked it up and moved it to a higher branch. I was certain I was helping. What I was actually doing was handling a young bird in a space the Tuesday couple and their extended social group treat as their territory, while the adults watched. For about 3 months after that morning, the feeder near that maple went quiet during the hours I was outside. Not when I wasn't there. Not at night. Specifically when I was present. And there was one more thing. I'd been wearing my bright orange jacket that day. For the following season, every time I came out in that coat, something changed in the yard. Birds flushed at distances they hadn't flushed at in months. The jacket had been cross-referenced with the incident and filed. It wasn't me they were flagging. It was me in that coat on a day in May, reaching for something. You cannot fix this with apology. You cannot fix it with more attention or extra effort. You cannot fix it by trying harder. What it accepts, the only thing it accepts, is time and consistent, boring, predictable behavior over that time. You back off. You become the most uneventful presence in your yard. You keep the feeder full on a predictable schedule, move slowly, stop wearing the jacket, and wait for the data points to stack back up in the right direction. I felt terrible about the fledgling for weeks. It didn't help a single bird. Backing off did. Number 5. On the other side of all of that, the fear distance, the body language, the resets, there's something I want to describe carefully. There's a quality to the way birds behave when they've classified you as safe that is different from simply not flying. It's a specific, visible thing. Mourning doves will turn their backs to you while feeding, a posture they almost never take when uncertain about a nearby presence. Carolina wrens, 18 to 22 grams, wired tight and reactive, will stay on the feeder when you step outside, where a season ago they'd have vanished under the holly bush before your door was fully open. An American robin, 77 grams and fiercely territorial in spring, will keep working the lawn within 10 feet of you. White-breasted nuthatches will sometimes come to the feeder while you're still filling it, working around your hand as though you're just part of the infrastructure. There's something worth sitting with in that. The research from Cornell on what they call approach tolerance in residential feeding station birds, documented across the eastern United States and replicated in European garden bird studies, shows that what birds develop towards specific familiar humans isn't simply reduced alarm response. It functions as something closer to a categorical exception. Not humans are safe. Not this person seems okay. Specifically, this presence in this pattern at this time belongs in a different bucket than threats. When my Cooper's hawk makes a low pass over the yard, and I have one that comes through every week or so, sends every songbird to the back of the hedge in about 3 seconds, the yard clears with total consensus. That's what a genuine threat reads like to a bird working with real data. The response to you, over time, can become something entirely different. You become, if you earn it, a feature of the environment rather than a variable in it. What earns it is not dramatic. Same time, same clothes, same pace and path, consistent feeder schedule, the occasional stillness, sitting outside near the yard, not watching the birds directly, just being in the space and not requiring anything from it. I used to want the birds in my yard to notice me in some positive way. It took me about 3 winters to understand that the version of mattering birds can actually give you doesn't look like attention. It looks like being forgotten, being so consistent and so undemanding that they stop tracking you as an event at all. That is the threshold you're working toward. And once you cross it, something changes. Number 6. There are specific, concrete behaviors that measurably reduce your bird's fear distance. They're less exciting than you probably want them to be. First, feeder placement. Birds tolerate closer human proximity when they have clear escape geometry, open sight lines in multiple directions, no walls or structures blocking their view of what's behind them. Research from Ohio State on suburban feeding station dynamics shows measurable differences in flush rates based on positioning alone. You're not just placing a food source, you're giving the birds a space they can leave from any angle instantly, which, counterintuitively, makes them more likely to stay. Second, sit outside without watching the birds. I resisted this longer than I should have, because sitting in my backyard doing nothing felt self-conscious in a way I couldn't quite explain to myself. But the effect on the yard was real and noticeable. When you're a stationary, non-directed presence in the yard, frequently enough, you stop registering as an arrival. You become context. The data point you represent shifts from large animal appeared to large animal in usual location, no action taken. And that is a fundamentally different entry in the model. Third, get to the window before the birds arrive. Work on window detection in chickadees and sparrows suggests birds begin registering movement through glass at distances that would catch most people off guard. If you walk to the window after they've landed, you've already initiated an approach they started logging from inside. Get there first. Be settled. Let them come to you. And fourth, and this one I think about more than the others, remember that your yard is a shared information space. Blue jays, 70 to 100 grams, and American crows function as something close to a loose early warning network for the smaller birds around them. That's heterospecific eavesdropping, one species using another's alarm vocalizations as live environmental data. What the jays broadcast about your presence reaches every bird in your yard within seconds. You are always being assessed by the full yard. The only question is what the assessment finds. Number 7. I've saved this one for last because it has to be last. There's a moment that happens, if you do this patiently enough, that I've been trying to describe for about 2 winters now, and I keep running into the same wall. I don't have great words for it. It's the moment the bird stays, not because it doesn't notice you, not because it has its back turned or is too focused on the feeder to register your presence, because it notices you, processes whatever it processes, and decides to stay anyway. At about 7:12 on a Tuesday in early April, I was standing at the back door with a coffee. Screen cracked about an inch, watching the Tuesday couple come in from the Japanese maple the way they do every week. 4 winners of Tuesdays. The female landed first. The male came in just behind her. I shifted my weight. The screen door made a small sound. Neither bird moved. They fed. I stood there. They kept feeding for about 2 more minutes. I'm aware of how small this sounds. 11 grams each. 2 birds doing what they do every Tuesday, what they'll do next Tuesday, regardless of whatever is happening in my week. 4 minutes. I stood there for about 4 minutes, the coffee in my hand getting cold. I let my breath out slowly so my chest wouldn't move, not because I was trying to practice stillness, but because I didn't want to break whatever it was that was happening. This is not friendship, this is not domestication, this is not the bond that forms between a person and an animal that chose human proximity as its natural state. What it is, and I want to be careful here because I don't want to overclaim something I can't actually verify, is a wild animal that didn't have to stay in a yard it can leave any time, that looked at the available evidence and decided, this one is safe. I don't know what to call that exactly. I've been trying for 4 winners. What I do know is this. The yard that stays with me, the one I think about when I'm traveling, the one I come back to first when I get home, isn't the one with the most activity or the rarest sightings. It's the one where something that had every right to be afraid of me chose, on a quiet Tuesday morning in April, not to be. Where 2 chickadees that owe me absolutely nothing decided that I had become part of the background, part of the yard, part of the morning. If that's happened in your yard, if a bird has ever looked at you and just not left, I want to hear about it. Has a bird ever stayed when it didn't have to, on a morning you really needed it to? I want to hear those stories. I read every one. I'll see you in the next one.